All righty, everyone, welcome. And we have Laura with us online. And I know Hazel will not be here, a little under the weather. And Stephanie said that she's going to be gone for 2 weeks. Yeah, she has some event that she's going to tonight, and then she's going to visit her daughter in DC. So why don't we begin with a word of prayer? God of grace, God of glory, we give you thanks for calling us together once again. And as we draw ever closer to the end of our Kerygma classes, we are thankful for the wisdom and the truth that we have received through our conversations each week. And we pray that this evening will also be a blessing for all of us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty, so we are looking at tonight the journeys. And the Apostle Paul, as we saw last week, wait a minute, am I correct or is that? Yeah, the journeys. As we learned last week, the Apostle Paul was a Roman citizen, which gave him the luxury of being able to travel throughout the Roman Empire. And that was something that the other apostles / disciples did not have. And so it was very advantageous and allowed the Christian faith to spread far wider than it might have otherwise. Paul went on 3 missionary journeys. Some say 4, because they count the journey from to Rome after he was accused and put on trial in his hometown. He said, you can't try me, I'm a Roman citizen. And Festus, the governor, says that famous verse in the book of Acts, to Rome you have appealed, to Rome you shall go. And so some people count that trip as a 4th missionary trip. All right. Any questions about any of the words, definitions? By the way, did you know that Eutychus is the patron saint for beleaguered parishioners? Yep. So that was one of the readings. Eutychus is a young boy. He goes into this house where Paul is preaching. Must have been a pretty big house because he's up on the 3rd floor and he's sitting in the window, and Paul goes on. He's a little long-winded, and Eutychus falls out the window and dies. Oh, no. Paul brings him back to life. But so I always call Eutychus the patron saint for beleaguered parishioners. Lydia, very important in the early church. She was a very wealthy businesswoman. And we know that she was wealthy because she was a merchant of purple cloth.
Yeah.
What's that? Okay, go ahead.
What is that? No, I'm loving that you're talking about it.
Yeah. So purple was a color that was only worn by, sorry. We'll get rid of you. Stop it. Anyways, purple was only worn by royalty because it was, the dye for the color purple was very expensive. They had ways of creating other dyes, but the only way they could create purple dye was from a certain seashell that was very limited in a certain area. And the seashell would be ground up because it had a purple pigment in it. And so the fact that Lydia is a purveyor of purple cloth tells us that she was very affluent. And in essence, she ends up bankrolling Paul's missionary journey. And so I think that's very significant. Okay. And of course, Timothy was one of the apostles who accompanied Paul, and he also is a recipient of a pastoral epistle. So there were the general epistles which Paul wrote to churches like in Corinth or to the Thessalonians, to the Ephesians, to the Galatians. But he also wrote a few letters that were for individuals, and Timothy is one of the pastoral epistles. It was Paul sort of giving his advice to a protege on how to be an apostle. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about any of the readings? I want to make sure that I answer any questions, and certainly, Laura, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them out there.
References to Asia, like under Acts 15.
Acts 15, yeah.
Having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
to speak for
Let's go look at that. Okay. Acts 15, and this is Paul's second missionary journey. All right, it's Acts 15:36. Okay, so why don't we go around and read this, and we'll go to my left. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are."
Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark.
And
But Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in
Pamphylia.
and had not gone with them to the word.
And David, you're next.
So sharp was their disagreement that they separated. Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus.
Before Paul left, he chose Silas to accompany him and was commended by the brothers to the grace of God.
He went through Syria and Cilicia,
Cilicia, yeah.
strengthening the churches.
And he came also to Derbe and to Lystra. A disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was Greek.
He was well spoken of by the brothers at his.
Lystra, yeah.
Lystra and
Iconium.
Paul wanted to take him along on the journey, so he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they knew that his father was Greek.
As they went on their way through the cities, they delivered to them for observance the decisions that had been reached by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem. And 5.
So the churches were strengthened in faith and they increased in numbers daily.
They traveled through, what's it, Phrygian?
Phrygia
What?
and Galatia.
Say the first one again?
Phrygia, that's how I've always pronounced it.
Okay.
Nobody's ever called me a liar.
You're good. This is fine. Galatian territory because they had been prevented by the Holy Spirit from preaching the message in the province of Asia.
Yep.
When they reached the frontier of Mysia, they tried to go into
Bithynia, yep.
but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them.
So they traveled right on through Mysia and went to
Troas, yep.
Troas.
And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing besieging him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us."
And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately he sought to go on to into Macedonia, including that God had called us to preach.
All righty. This is probably one of the most pivotal moments in the emergence of the early church. And your question is, why were they forbidden to go to Asia? Yep. And we have no definitive answer to that. We can speculate. And essentially, if you went east, okay, you're heading into an area with an established religion of Hinduism and further on Buddhism. In Europe, it was pagan, but it was a more fertile field. And that's what is kind of speculated. But, you know, it was a turning point. Imagine how different the world would be if, you know, Paul had followed his instincts and gone into Asia. And, you know, the Christian faith had not spread throughout Europe and then into, you know, the New World. So it really was a pivotal moment in the early church. And, you know, it's also a fascinating story for me because, you know, I think about it and it reminds me, you know, sometimes I want to go this way, but, you know, God wants me to go this way, okay? And the example that I will use is becoming a minister. That was not my intention. When I went to BU, my intention was to go on to law school. That's what I, you know, felt I was going to do with my life. And what I discovered, and now I had thought about becoming a minister all the way back when I was in like the 7th grade. And I kept dismissing the idea and, you know, you look throughout the scriptures and everyone, or many people who are called have a reason why they're going to say no. You know, Moses says, I'm of slow speech. They believe that he might have been a stutterer. Jeremiah says, I'm only a kid. Okay, and so every time I dismissed the idea, it came back to me in an unexpected way. And, you know, I tell people that sometimes when a person says, why isn't God answering my prayer? Okay, one possibility is God is answering your prayer. You just don't want to hear the answer. And, you know, sometimes God's answer to a prayer is no, or not yet, or no, but, okay. And so, you know, I just think this is a wonderful story where Paul listens to those little signals that he's getting. And then he gets a great big signal when he has this vision. And, you know, there's a young man saying, you know, come over to help us. And of course, Paul, when they're talking about Asia, really talking about Asia Minor, which would be Turkey and Iran and all of those places as they're known today. Macedonia is just above Greece, you know, and also think about it. Where was the center of world power at that time? Rome, you know. So if Paul goes that way, he has a much more fertile field in which to plant. Was something, oh, you know what's something that I noted in my notes, and I highlighted it in yellow and put 3 question marks next to it. And that is verse 3. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because the Jews were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. Didn't we find out last week that, you know, at the first church council, the question was asked, you know, do you have to be a good Jew to be a Christian? And the answer was no. So why is Paul doing this ritual? He's being, and I'll tell you what else also, little later on, Paul gives Peter a hard time because Paul sees Peter with a bunch of Jews and he's keeping the kosher laws. And, you know, so he gives Peter a hard time about that, but it's sort of like he looks the other way when it comes to this. Accepted, yeah, yeah. You know, there is a reason. I just think it's kind of interesting that, you know, Paul points the finger at Peter for going against what the council had said, and yet Paul also goes against what the council had said. Yeah.
Doesn't Paul have a soft spot in his heart for Timothy? I thought that.
So yeah, he becomes
under his wing and.
Yeah, Timothy really becomes Paul's protege, and he really provides Paul with moral support at difficult times. Okay. What else do we have here? Sure.
What was up with Mark? Like, why did Paul not?
So apparently, on the first missionary journey, something happened in one of the places where they were preaching. And Mark kind of left. So the sense I always had is that things were getting kind of heated, and instead of sticking it out, Mark kind of abandoned them. And Paul never forgot that. And Barnabas wanted to bring Mark with them. And so, they go their separate ways, which, just goes to show you, churches have been fighting amongst themselves right from the very beginning. But what's also very heartening is later on, Paul and Barnabas reconcile. Look, it's funny because the sermon Sunday, I'll give you a preview of coming attractions. The sermon is starting out with the statement that, when you're a minister, inevitably there are going to be times when you find yourself in hot water. Because no matter how hard you try, you can't please everyone all the time. And I had one of those hot water moments many years ago. It was on Easter Sunday. Okay. And I had what I thought was a pretty good children's message. After I invited the boys and girls to join me, I held up a deck of cards and I showed them a card trick. Well, the children were amazed by it. And then that allowed me to then say that the women were amazed when they went to the tomb on Easter morning and discovered that it was empty. Only it wasn't a trick. It was a miracle. And based upon the reaction of the children, I thought, okay, that was successful. I gave myself a pat on the back, but then quickly realized that the pat on the back was a little premature. And I realized that when I went up to Fellowship Hall and I was talking to Arthur Johnston, and I said, Arthur, do you want me to show you how I did the card trick? Well, Arthur quickly shook his head and said, no, I do not want you to show me how you did the card trick. And I never thought I would see the day when the minister would be playing with cards in the sanctuary on Easter Sunday, no less. And if you didn't know Arthur Johnson, he was a great guy. Yeah, he had a wonderful sense of humor, but he wasn't happy that day. But he grew up in the 30s, and he grew up Baptist. So, for him, on the Sabbath, you didn't play cards, you didn't mow your lawn, you couldn't go to the stores, they were all closed. And, you didn't go to the movies. But Arthur got over it. What's that? Yeah, Arthur was a great guy. Yeah. So was his wife Jenny. She was a sweetheart. But Paul and Barnabas are eventually reconciled. Yes.
So it talks about the idols coming back in Acts 17, verse 16 to 34.
Where are we now? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's in Acts 17, verse 16 to 34. And it's Paul in Athens. He's upset to see the city was full of idols.
Yep.
And by mistake, I took the wrong lesson tonight. So I was also reading, I know, I'm like, oh, this completely these days. So then tonight, I was reading about the fact that in Galatians, they talk about one gospel, and they were trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. And so I guess I get confused on like why people are so tempted by like the new shiny penny, and they're like, oh, an idol or a new gospel, or like it just, unless it's like, why can't, I don't know, I guess it makes me like wonder if I'm gonna like stay the course or if I'm gonna get distracted by something that I shouldn't.
Yeah.
It just.
Well, there's no doubt that there are false idols today. They're just very different. Back then, you worshiped a stone. Okay. Maybe another way of putting it is we have a lot of false gods today. And so I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So your question is,
So it just seems like these are like little serpents that tempt you
Oh.
over here, and like, then there's a little new gospel over here. And so I guess I was wondering what your counsel would be to like know that you're staying true to the course.
mhm,
Because if people are getting distracted by what's on the sidelines, or they get just like what we were saying at the beginning of this whole series of like money and prestige, and you get tempted by what social media
Yep.
says to you is important. How can you like
So,
have that?
as you were talking, I
Distract.
thought of this little story. So what I do is I say to myself, Jesus is the incarnation of the living God, okay? And so I hold everything up to the Christ, okay? You know, and there's this phrase that was popular about 20 years ago, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Okay, and yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. And so, you know, if I see something or read something or whatever in scripture, and if I say to myself, can I picture Jesus saying or doing this? The answer is no. Okay, then I know that that's not where I'm going. Okay, but you're right, it is hard, you know, because the human mind can rationalize anything. Okay, I remember my father, when he wanted to lose some weight, he had a really interesting approach to dieting. Okay, so every day for lunch, he would have a can of Slim Fast. And then he would have 2 or 3 cookies for dessert. And his argument being, I had the Slim Fast, so I can have the cookies. So yeah, we have to be careful because we can rationalize anything, but you know, I try to hold everything up to the lens of Christ and say, you know, does this jive with the Jesus I follow? And, you know, as you were talking, I also thought, I'll never forget when I was in Maine, I had a young confirmand come to me, and he was into heavy metal. But he also knew that some heavy metal can be, I guess, satanic or something like that. And so he's concerned about that. And I said, look, I said, as long as you focus on, you know, Jesus, those temptations have no power over you. What I thought you were going to ask is about the thing with the unknown God. You know, Paul is being very smart here. Okay, he's in Athens, which was a center of learning back then, and he's got all of these skeptics. And what he does is he relates to them on their terms. You know, he says, "Oh, I was going about your fair city, and you know, I can see that you're very religious because you have all of these statues, and I noticed one that was inscribed to an unknown God. And I just want you to know that I'm here to tell you all about that unknown God." You know, it is a great way of connecting and influencing or attempting to influence. You meet them where they are, okay? And that doesn't always happen. Yes, yeah.
Can I ask, just in general, why do you think that Paul wasn't so well received in Athens?
Be-
I understand he wasn't well received in another place.
Right, yeah, there's no, yeah, there were no epistles to the Athenians. And, you know, sometimes knowledge can not be a great thing.
There's all the intellectuals there.
Yeah.
It's not materialism that's there. It's
Mhm.
relatively well considered.
Yes, it was, sure, yeah. And you know what else? You notice he also quotes 2 passages. And don't go looking for them in the Old Testament. He's actually quoting a Greek poet and a Greek playwright. And so again, he's connecting with them, you know. And, you know, when we had student ministers, I would always tell them all ministry is relational, okay? It all depends on relationships. And that's what Paul's doing here. He's trying to establish a connection with them. And I would always ask our student ministers fairly early on, I would say to them, what is the most important thing to being a really good minister? And they would say things like, well, give a good sermon. And I said, well, that's important, but not the most important thing. And they'd say, visit people when they're in the hospital. And I would say, that's important, but that's not the most important thing. And they would just go through all these different things. Finally, they give up and they'd say, what's the most important thing to being a really good minister? And I would tell them to make sure, the most important thing with being a really good minister is make sure that your congregation loves you. Because if they don't love you, they're not going to listen to you and they're not going to follow you. And I said, you know what the best way is to make your congregation love you? You make sure that they know you love them. That's the key right there. And so Paul is making a connection, and that's one of the things that, I love about ministry is talking to people and hearing their story. Everybody has a story to tell. And invariably I'll find a connection, something that we share in common. Steve and Carolyn Hemmon, who just joined, okay? They came from Congregational Church in Winchester, no, Westchester. It's out in the central part, not Winchester, but anyways, so he was also on the board of directors for our conference. So, he knows the ropes and everything. And so he asked to come in and sit down and talk to me and learn a little more about this community of faith. And as we were talking, finding all of these connections. And he says, well, you won't see us a lot in the summer because we go up to a place we have on Ottawa Lake. And I said, oh, I've never heard of that lake. And he says, oh, it's up central Maine. It's at the foot of a Borestone Mountain. Well, as soon as he said that, I almost fell off my chair. I said, that's like one town over from where both my parents grew up. And I said, I climbed Borestone as a kid many times. And, and as he talked, there were more connections. He had a minister at the church out in the central part of the state, Ray Medeiros. I said, are you kidding me? And he looked at me and I said, Ray Medeiros was ordained in the church where I was ordained in. He came after me, but there's that connection. And we just found connection after connection. And, that's, my gosh, that we need more of that these days. People are so isolated and, there need this, this is why and I'm going to say this in the sermon Sunday as well. You know what the hardest part of the service always was for me? The pastoral prayer. Oh my gosh, I struggled every week because I always felt like I was the designated prayer to use a baseball term. And it was always hard. And so when we decided to go with the prayers of the faithful, at first I was a little skeptical. It always kind of felt a little bit like Phil Donahue. Remember the Phil Donahue, and he'd run down with the microphone and everything. But then as I saw it kind of develop, what makes my heart glad is, when somebody announces that, they're going to be, have a baby, and people applaud, and I see the applause, the clapping as an act of faith, expression of thanks. Or when somebody shares a bit of bad news, I've seen it many times. Somebody sitting in the pew behind the person will lean forward and put their hand on the person's shoulder. And, we need more of that. And, that's really what the Christian faith is all about. It's all about, grace and connections and loving one another in this crazy mixed up, world. And, that's why we have a product that people need, but we're not doing a very good job of sharing it. I remember years ago, I went to a seminar. I was in seminary. No, I just graduated from seminary because it was all ordained ministers. And the keynote speaker got up and he said, I think we should congratulate ourselves. And we've done something amazing. And of course, we're all sitting there thinking, what did we do? And then he said, we have succeeded in making Jesus Christ boring. Ouch, you know? So, you know, thank goodness for Paul. All right, what else do we have here? Oh, by the way, did anybody notice in Acts 20, in verse 6, it's one of the mysteries of the book of Acts. Verse 6, okay. Well, start with verse 1. Okay, after the uproar ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia. Then go down to verse 5. These went on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas, but we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. At several points in the book of Acts, it suddenly changes from third person plural to first person plural, from they or him to us. And it happens several places. And biblical scholars have always wondered what's going on here, you know, because we're talking about him and they, and then all of a sudden we're talking about we. And what they believe is that the person who wrote the book of Acts on some occasions was actually with Paul. And so that's when it switches over to that.
Is it?
Say again?
Supposedly Luke.
Yes. Yep. Mark, Luke. Yep. Because the writer of the Gospel of Luke also wrote Acts. Absolutely. Very good. Gold star. Oh, yeah. And also in that is a famous verse 35. In all things I have shown you that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, how he himself said, it is more blessed to give than receive. We've all had those words, right? Yep. You won't find them in the Gospels. There's no record in any of the Gospels of Jesus saying that. So obviously this is something that was known back then, but it's not recorded in any of the Gospels. This is the only place you'll find it. It's not in any of the Gospels. That those famous words, wouldn't you think that those famous words would be found somewhere in the Gospel? That's not the case. All righty. And oh, let's look at the reaction. Acts 16. And so, which this starts with, verse 11. Yeah, and here's another. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace. Let's start with verse 16. We can go to my right. As we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. And verse 17, Shelley. Yep.
This girl followed Paul and the rest of us shouting, these men are servants of the Most High God, who are telling you the way to be saved.
And this she kept doing for many days. Paul, having become greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And it came out that very hour.
But when others saw that their hope of getting was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers.
They brought them before the Roman officials and said, these men are Jews and they are causing trouble in our city.
They are Jews and are advocating practices which is unlawful for us as Romans to accept or follow.
The crowd joined in the attack on them. The magistrates had them stripped and ordered them to be beaten with rods.
And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely.
Yep. And now I'm gonna, so they end up in jail. And you know, suddenly all the doors are open and the jailer thinks that they've escaped and he's about to kill himself. And Paul says, oh, don't do that. We're still here. And then we pick it up in verse 35. But when it was day, the magistrates sent the police saying, let those men go.
The jailer told Paul, these magistrates have ordered that you and Silas be released. Now you can leave. Go in peace.
So Paul said to them, they have beaten us publicly uncondemned, men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No, let them come themselves to take us out.
The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard and that they were Roman citizens.
So they went and apologized to them. Then they led them out of the prison and asked them to leave the city.
From the prison, they went to Lydia's house, where they saw all the brothers and gave them some encouragement.
Okay.
Then they left.
Yep. So see what's going on here? I can see the magistrates and the powers that be in this community to use the expression in the movie, the Christmas Story about the kid who wants the BB gun. I can see them saying, "Oh fudge!"
Yeah.
You know, they've screwed up big time. They've screwed up big time because Paul was a Roman citizen. And you couldn't treat a Roman citizen like that. You had to go through a trial and everything. And for whatever reason, they didn't realize that they were Roman citizens. And does Paul turn the other cheek here? I love this. I love this because, you know, Paul is turning the tables on them.
Yeah.
He's turning the tables on them. And, you know, I had a classmate when I was in high school, and he said that he didn't want to be a Christian. And he said that he didn't want to be a part of religion that requires you to be a doormat. And, you know, I look back on that now and I say to myself, boy, you really don't have you didn't have an idea what the Christian faith is all about. You know, it is not about being a doormat. It's, you know, look, Jesus never promised anyone that, you know, if they followed him, it was always going to be easy. And, you know, I just like this because, you know, there are times when we have to do what Paul did and basically say, you know what? I'm going to call it like it is, you know, and I can't love you if there's this game that we're playing. And, you know, do you think that the apology the magistrates gave was sincere to Paul? Probably not. Probably not. But, you know, I just like the fact that Paul stood up for himself, you know, and so no, being a person of faith doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. Okay. It doesn't mean that you throw gasoline onto the fire. Okay. But, you know, you stand up for what is right. You stand up for yourself, but you do it in a way that is full of grace and not vindictiveness. And so I just, you know, good for you, Paul. Good for you. And, you know, Paul could be pretty prickly at times. And, but I like, yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
What struck me odd
What's that?
When we read this passage,
Yeah,
is the word police. I mean, all this, I'm reading all these ancient words. And
yeah, yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like police. Did they really call them police back then? I would think
Well,
jailers
it's
or
probably the
something like that.
translation. I'm just going back to see what mine says. I have the magistrates.
Yeah, it says the police reported, verse 38.
What verse is this?
38.
38?
The police reported these words to.
Oh, yeah, the police.
I'm like, is that something that when they? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, obviously they had to have some way of enforcing laws. If we'd have to go to the original Greek to find out what the word was, but it's translated basically as police. I have police in mind.
I have like this.
What do you have?
Like CPRS. I said, I'm not saying that word. I like CPRS.
Yeah, also one says
Lectors?
lifters.
LICTORS.
Lictors?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Maybe a member of an ancient Roman class and imperial attendants, probably Etruscan in origin.
Okay, so ancient Roman,
Lictor is the member of an ancient Roman class of magisterial attendants. That seems too early.
I never heard the word.
and you have the good news, right?
New Jerusalem.
Oh, okay, so you switched on me. Okay, that's interesting. I would not have known what that meant.
Just assume some authority.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they just translated it or whatever.
Yep.
It just was jarring to me, you know. You know.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. But no, it's, I mean, clearly they had to have, something akin to a police force. I mean, people weren't all goody two shoes back then either, so, yep. And let's look at, we've done Paul in the prison, we've done Paul in Athens. Done. Oh, yeah. Did anyone notice that there weren't as many readings for this section as others? Yeah. So let's look at the X. Yeah, let's look at Paul being arrested. Let's Yep. And he's yeah, you know what I did? 21:17. That's 27. All right, so why don't we read this section, this 21:27. And we'll go to my left this time. When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing Paul in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him. And Max, if you would go.
The 7 days were almost complete. Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him.
Okay, and 28, Dave.
Shouting, fellow Israelites, help us. This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and the law in this place. And what is more, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and defiled the sacred place.
29, yep.
They had in fact previously seen Trophimus and Ephesian in the city with him and thought that Paul had brought him into the temple.
Which would have been a big no-no. Because he would have,
Spread through the whole city, and the people all ran together, grabbed Paul and dragged him out of the temple. At once the temple doors were closed.
And as they were trying to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion.
He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul.
The commander came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. Then he asked who he was and what he had done.
Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another, and as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered them to be brought into the barracks. 35.
When he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd.
So a crowd of people followed and shouted away with him.
Just as Paul was being taken into the fortress, he asked the tribune if he could have a word with him. The tribune said, you speak Greek then?
Then you are not an Egyptian, follow,
Oh.
who, some time ago started a revolution and led 4,000 armed terrorists out into the desert.
What was that?
What he just read was not even close.
No?
Well, that's what happened.
Paul replied, I'm a Jew from Tarsus and Cilicia,
Cilicia, yep.
a citizen of no mean city. I beg you, let me speak to the people.
And when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the steps, motioned with his hands to the people. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying,
Now, so Paul is being arrested, and then over on Acts 28, we're going to see how things come to an end. Yeah, and yeah, 28:16. So I think
Okay.
Yep.
When we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him.
so, like I said, we know that when the book of Acts comes to an end, Paul is under house arrest in Rome. After 3 days, he called together the local leaders of the Jews, and when they had gathered, he said to them, brothers, though I had done nothing against our people or customers of our father, yet I was delivered as a prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans.
When they had examined me, they wished to set me at liberty, because there was no reason for the death penalty in my case.
But when the Jews objected, I was obliged to appeal to Caesar, even though I had no accusation to make against my own nation.
That is why I have urged you to see me and have a discussion with me. For it is on account of the hope of Israel that I wear this chain.
They said to him, we have not received any letters from Judea about you, nor have any of our people come from there with any news or anything bad to say about you.
But we desire to hear from you what your views are. But with regard to this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against.
When they had appointed the day for him, they came to him at his lodging in great numbers. From morning till evening, he expounded to them, testifying to the kingdom of God and trying to convince them about Jesus, both from the law of Moses and from the prophets.
Some were convicted by what he had said, but others would not believe.
And disagreeing among themselves, they departed after Paul had made one statement. The Holy Spirit was right in saying to your fathers through Isaiah the prophet.
Go to this people and say, you will indeed hear, but never understand, and you will indeed see, but never perceive.
Gross is the heart of this people. They will not hear with their ears when they have closed their eyes, so they may not see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart and be converted, and I give them.
You must realize then that this salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will listen to it.
For 2 years, Paul lived in a place for himself. Very welcomed all who came to see him.
Preaching the kingdom of God and teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ, quite openly and unhindered.
And that's how the book of Acts ends. We have no definitive proof about what happened to Paul. In a way, it's not surprising. I mean, in the scheme of things in the Roman Empire, he wasn't an important person. You know, he's important for us in the Christian faith, but he wasn't as far as the Roman Empire was concerned. It's generally believed that Paul was eventually put to death. And any thoughts as to why that is what's generally believed.
Did the Romans put him to death? Yes.
Mhm.
He didn't
So-
write any more letters.
What's that?
Because he didn't write any more.
Yeah, there were no more letters, there were no more journeys. You know, if Paul had survived his experience in Rome, we know that he wanted to continue going west over toward, Spain. And that never happened. So either Paul died of natural causes or he was put to death. And the story, the story of Paul ends with him in Rome. It's sort of like it's almost like you get to a novel and you get to the end and say, wait a minute. Yeah, it just reminded me, there was a movie out a number of years ago. I wish I could remember the name of the movie. It was based on a true story. And it was about a couple who were honeymooning somewhere down in the Caribbean. And they went scuba diving. And something happened with one of the tanks. And so one lets another one use the tank and everything.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this?
No, but, yeah, if you lose your tank, so still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens is because of whatever it was that was done, they leave.
The boat leaves.
The boat leaves and this couple
We're left.
Let's see.
are left out there.
It's-
Oh, it's true. This happened probably about 15 years ago.
Was it- Yeah.
They
They laugh.
just left.
It's great,
Yeah,
very deep.
yeah. And so eventually I forget the guy drowns or something. And the movie ends, okay, with the woman out there, and obviously they died because they never found them. But the movie ends with her suddenly being tugged underwater. We got to the end of that movie, I was so mad. I was furious because it says based on a true story, right?
Yeah,
Well, if they died out there, how does everyone know what really happened?
well,
There was nobody there. I said, I just wasted 2 hours of my life on this stupid.
they were very deep. The idea was a shark,
What's that?
a shark.
Oh, well, that's what you're led to believe, but there's nothing that no. And, so I, what's that?
I'd rather that by shark than brown. or-
Really?
Yeah.
She walked in her sister.
Oh, not me, not me. Oh, no. But this is how Acts comes to an end. But when you think about it, Paul's done his work. If Paul is the single most responsible person for the Christian faith taking root and spreading as it did. And part of the reason he listened to that voice saying, don't go over to Asia. He endured. We're probably going to see this next week, but the proclamation is going to get us into Paul's letters. And, Paul was in prison. He caused a riot in Ephesus. He was kicked out of the city. He was beaten, all the trials and the tribulations that he went through. But
Who is it that writes Acts?
Luke,
Luke.
yep.
So in that last paragraph,
Yep.
there he said, and he lived there for 2 whole years.
Yeah,
That is all the time. That could have been just Luke saying, well.
That's all, folks.
He's gone.
yeah. And isn't it kind of interesting that he was there for that long a period of time, but there's nothing, you would think of 2 years, there would be a little bit more than, he was there for 2 years.
He was arrested, he was crucified, he was whatever.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder why,
Well, you knew he was there 2 years. No, we're not after.
yep, so,
Or
But he
whatever.
doesn't say anything.
yeah.
Just
And-
been getting older.
Yeah, maybe, but you know what I just thought of is, in a way, I kind of like the way it ends. Because it's a story that doesn't have a proper ending. And in a way that's good, because if you think about it, we're the ones that are supposed to be writing the next chapter.